itself in a squeeze bottle to keep your nasal passages hydrated and flush those toxins out of your system. So if you don't like doing the pot so much, you can still get a lot of benefit from the squeeze bottle saline, which you can find in any grocery store or pharmacy for about, I don't know what, $3-4, something like that. And it's one of the best tools you have for not only allergies but colds as well. Whenever you get congestion, all of those things, whenever there's a lot of stress on the nasal passages, using that to keep them hydrated is essential, and actually can save you money on going to the drugstore and buying cold and allergy medications that you don't really need, because that plus some Tylenol or naproxen or whatever your doctor recommends can be much better than any of these over-the-counter drugs that cost quite a bit. So those are some things to keep focused on for your spring wellness. Now let's move on to some of these dietary changes, or continue to make dietary changes. Now maybe you are trying to lose weight. Losing weight is a good idea for a lot of our health issues. So changing our diet is the way to do that, rather than to go on some of these, expensive or intricate diet programs. Just making the changes in your diet that you can make and you can feel good about will help you much more than trying to focus on a diet program that can easily get out of control or just become frustrating. So we like to focus on, as far as weight concerns are concerned, we like to focus on changing your diet and the ways to do that, and things to stay away from and things to integrate. So here is some suggestions, or here are some suggestions for integrating things into your diet that can help you with your blood pressure. If you have a blood pressure that runs a little high, and you're trying to keep your blood pressure down without having to take medications, there's something known as the DASH diet. DASH, D-A-S-H. It stands for Dietary Approaches to Stop Hypertension. And this is something that the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute has developed, and seems to have a high level of acceptance from nutritionists and physicians, and seems to be a proven method of lowering high blood pressure. So this is something that is considered to be one of the best diets available. And again, it's not a diet program; it's just a changing of your diet. It's not a program that you have to go on. It's endorsed by AHA, American Heart Association, Mayo Clinic, and is part of the U.S. guidelines for treatment of high blood pressure. So it's important to understand and learn about the DASH diet. It can also help with several kinds of cancers, lowering the risk of breast, prostate, and colorectal cancer. And it's been shown to improve bone health. And there's some connection to a possibility of lowering the risk of hearing loss in women, which is interesting, according to some studies. So, what is the DASH diet? Well, let's find out, huh? It consists of antioxidants. That is the big linchpin for all of these things. And it's basically you want to introduce more of these fruits and vegetables that are antioxidants. You want to consume less salt and fat, and more whole grains and low-fat dairy. Now that may take some getting used to, so you do it step by step to change your dairy, to change your intake of salt and fat. Begin looking at, if you're not already, you should begin looking at the labels of the food that you have in your cupboard, the food that you're picking up at the grocery store. Look at the levels of saturated fat, total fat, cholesterol. And also lowering the amount of red meat and sweets and sugared beverages. So you have 4 to 5 daily servings of vegetables and fruit, 2 or 3 servings of low-fat or non-fat dairy products. That could be, low-fat milk or butter or cheese. Whole grain. Now they suggest 6 servings of whole grains per day, like whole wheat bread. So if you have 2 slices of whole wheat bread and for lunch and a sandwich, and you've got 2 of your servings right there. Maybe you have toast for breakfast, so you've got 3 servings. Then you just have to find a way to integrate it for your dinner. A couple of more slices of the whole grains. Or you can mix it up with dry cereal, so you have a couple of servings of the whole wheat bread and maybe whole wheat dry cereal or whole wheat rice or pasta. An ounce of the cereal is a serving. Half an ounce of the cereal, rice, or pasta is a serving. And our calories per day on this diet, well, they can range between 1,800 and 3,000, depending on who you are and how much calorie intake you need to have. Now, this also includes servings of fish or poultry, and they encourage daily servings of fish or poultry. So if you're not so much of a fish fan, like I myself am not, you can focus on the poultry, like chicken breasts, that kind of thing. And then 4 to 5 servings of nuts, beans, seeds, those sorts of things. You want to limit your sugar-sweetened beverages and sodium intake. So your sodium intake should be about 2,300 milligrams a day, even down to 1,500 milligrams if possible. Same for the amount of sugar. So it's just keep an eye on the amount of sugar that you're taking in, and that's in the foods that you're eating. And the best way to help you with that is to kind of steer clear of the processed and prepared foods. Now, a lot of these grocery stores are preparing foods and having those available, and they're really handy, but you need to check the labels, because some of them are even worse than some of the frozen foods and canned foods out there. So you may, as I mentioned, the calorie range can be from 1,600 to 2,400. And for men, all up to about 3,000. If you're, under the age of, say, 30 or so. 2,000 if you're above that. Those are just averages. But that's about where you want to be if you're watching your weight. So those are the kinds of amounts of calories you want to put in. So that's great. Now, that's one way to change your diet to help your immune system tackle whatever it's going to have to deal with in the spring. Now, let's move on to the topic of meat, because that is part of that diet and part of what most of these physicians and nutritionists are talking about, is, the effects of red meat on your body, and how do we limit our intake of red meat. So there's a new study out about red meat, and I'm very cautious about these studies because, as you know, they tend to show different things depending on how good the science is, and there are a lot of factors. So you really need to look at studies very carefully before you just kind of take them as gospel. I know everyone likes to think, science is, the gospel truth of everything, but unfortunately it just isn't. There are a lot of factors that affect the validity of findings in science. So that's why you have all of these changing ideas about eggs are good for you, eggs are bad for you, red meat is good for you, red meat is bad for you. So now this latest research on red meat is coming from California's Loma Linda Institute. And researchers investigated the health effects of eating very small amounts of red and processed meat compared to never eating red meat. Apparently, earlier studies compared eating higher amounts of red meat to low intakes. But this research looks at eating a little meat compared to eating none. And it included 96,000 Seventh-day Adventist adults in the U.S. and Canada participating in this ongoing larger health study. Approximately half of Seventh-day Adventists don't eat meat as part of their religious observance, and those who do consume it consume very small amounts. And the study participants described their diets on food questionnaires, and the investigators noted that 90% of those who reported eating meat consumed only 2 ounces or less daily. Then the researchers evaluated the deaths of 7,961 participants over 11 years, and the results showed that 2,598 deaths were due to cardiovascular disease and 1,873 to cancer. So through this, they found that eating processed and red meat increased the risk of total death by 23% and of cardiovascular disease death by 34%. The researchers reported that processed meat alone wasn't significantly associated with the deaths, possibly because only relatively few participants consumed it, but they found that red meat intake was associated with higher risks of total and cardiovascular disease deaths, adding to earlier evidence showing that eating meat can negatively affect health and lifespan. So as I said, you need to look at these studies very carefully. One of the things that I noticed in the studies, they said that this was based on questionnaires. The study participants described their diets on questionnaires. So you're depending on accurate reporting of their food behavior on questionnaires. Now, this is not to say that the participants may have lied, but they can certainly, be concerned with wanting to have certain results, wanting to show certain